Hey guys, welcome back. It's the Son and Tim show. As we stated, he's Son, I am Tim. Now we're talking about Notre Dame, Alabama in the first of the national semifinals this Friday on New Year's Day. Now, as you know, this is the first game, so it's 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. It's the Rose Bowl, which oddly enough has been moved from Pasadena, California to AT&T Stadium. I think this is the second time ever the Rose Bowl has been moved. So, Son, us being in LA, that's kind of a sad day.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of sucks. But we have a pretty good matchup in this one. No one really, and just to let you know, this is the biggest spread in college football history. Alabama is favored by 20 points in this game. So 20 points. Son, I want to hear about Mac Jones in Alabama.
Mac Jones. Everybody knows about Mac Jones in Alabama, dude. No, you tell me about Ian Book. We need to know about this guy. You go first. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Let's talk about Ian Book. Obviously, eyes are going to be on Mac Jones in this one. Ian Book is not a quarterback, Son, you win because of. He's the quarterback you win with. He's probably not going to be drafted. He has only about 2,600 yards on the season, 15 touchdowns, 2 picks. He does run the ball pretty well. He has 11 touchdowns and 400 yards on the ground. Book, he had over 2,500 yards. He had more yards last year. He hasn't regressed, but he's become more of a game manager this season. He's not a super exciting dude to watch. And you saw that. You saw that especially against Clemson last week. He didn't get 2 weeks ago. He didn't get a touchdown. He was pressing most of the game. Against Clemson the first time around, he finally was forced to make shots down the field, right? So that's part of the reason Notre Dame won. They got a couple shots down the field. Ian Book finally had the balls to get that going and trust himself. I think a lot of it may be confidence with him because he gets most of his yards on dink and dunk, short passes. So we'll have to see with Ian Book, man. That's obviously not an advantage for Notre Dame, but they do have an advantage when it comes to the running game. They have a guy named Karen Williams. Karen Williams has over 1,060 yards on the season. He has, let's see how many, 12 touchdowns on the ground, 27 receptions in the air, and a touchdown. When Notre Dame beat Clemson, he had 200 yards on the ground. So Karen Williams was everywhere. Offensive line for Notre Dame was getting the push. Williams was bursting down the field. He was their most effective weapon. Last week, however, against Clemson, he only had about 30 yards. So they really shut him down. So Notre Dame, as we know, Notre Dame got spit on. They got buried against Clemson last week. Everything that worked in their first game against Clemson when they won in overtime didn't work. So that's why they lost 34-10. They also do have some decent receivers. One of the names is Javon McKinley and Ben Schwarnick. Obviously, I'm looking down because these players aren't as well known as Alabama's receivers. But they have combined for about 65 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns on the year. Interesting stat I was telling you before, McKinley actually, anytime he gets above 5 receptions, the team is averaging 39 points per game. So they need to get him involved, obviously, per the stats. They need to get him involved well. Notre Dame also has good tight ends. They got this guy named Baby Gronk, Michael Mayer. You saw him in the beginning of the Clemson game when he rolled down the sidelines for that. I think he had a 30 or 40-yard reception. Looked pretty good. He has about 35 catches on the season, and he looks a little better than Cole Kmet. And they Tim. Yeah, and he's a freshman, so that he's probably going to be a first-round pick in the next couple of years. And then they also have another dude named Tommy Tremble, who has about 19 receptions on the season. This is really important because Notre Dame has to take advantage of Clemson's weak passing defense.
You mean Alabama?
Clemson, Alabama.
Well, it's because they played Clemson twice.
Yes, they need to take advantage of Alabama's weak passing defense. They're giving up about 240 yards through the air, and they're about 71st nationally. So aside from Patrick Surtain, who we've talked about, he's pretty much going to be the number 1 or number 2 He's only allowed 19 freaking completions all season. Alabama's susceptible against the pass, and that's mainly seen versus tight ends. Kyle Pitts went over 100 yards last week. Ole Miss tight end was awesome and dominant when they played Ole Miss. There's a major concern. However, Alabama is really good against the run. I think they're top 10 nationally. They stop running backs aside from one huge game by Ole Miss running back. Look out for Will Anderson, who's had 7 sacks. He's a freshman. He's come on in the last 4 games with 7 sacks. And Christian Barmore, who's going to be a first-round pick this spring. He has 6 sacks in his last 3 games. So Alabama's pretty exciting. They also do have Christian Harris and Dylan Moses. They're the main linebackers for Alabama. They should be able to also stop Notre Dame's offense. And they pretty much recovered well by losing a bunch of players in the draft. And we'll get into this, son. I'll get into this later because I have a huge theory on how Notre Dame has to win this game. But pretty much in essence, Ian Book has to take shots down the field early to open up the run game and play action passing. So that's kind of like, in my opinion, the mindset. And then about 20 other things has to happen. So I know that was a long-winded thing, son. But come on, dude, I need to hear about Mac Jones. You already put me off once.
Okay, well, really quick, who do you give the edge to? Do you give the edge to Notre Dame's offense or Alabama's defense?
Alabama's defense.
Alabama's defense.
Alabama's defense. I mean, they gave up a lot of points against Florida, right? Because Florida was the first great quarterback in Kyle Trask that they went up against. They haven't played other great quarterbacks this year, and they've shut every one of them down. So I don't anticipate anything great from Ian Book, and they're going to get to him, and yeah, it won't be pretty.